Kind of, yeah. You get a little bit more. You get a little bit more sensitive to it, and watch it a little bit differently. That's for sure, yeah. But you know what is more annoying is like, I mean, we're all humans. That works, right? You know, but what is more annoying with the whole Gen AI stuff is I get a lot of emails, obviously, like all of us. And some of those emails are very well written now, and you definitely know that that person used some Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever, to
Especially if you
draft
know
the
the
email.
person doesn't speak like that. Hey there, welcome to Beta Talks the podcast.
I am Rick.
And I am Oscar. And today we are joined by Rene Schulte, who is the head of 3D and quantum communities of practices at Reply. Welcome, Rene.
Hi, thanks for having me here, Oscar and Rick. I'm excited to be on the show and talk a little bit about some cool stuff, hopefully.
Well, I hope so too. And that's, of course, the reason we invited you because, and I think I speak for Oscar as well, you are quite active on socials. You pop up on X or on LinkedIn, or, I mean, we see you all over the place. And most of the times it's with really cool stuff that you're working with. So to start it all off, let's find out a bit more about your actual role at Reply. So what is a general day at Reply look like for you?
Oh, well, there's a lot of different stuff for sure that are happening every day. But yeah, what I do at Reply, it's a good question. Thanks for the shout out there. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm quite active on social, LinkedIn and X and what have you. Yeah, what I do as my day job. So basically, I work at Reply. Maybe a few words about the company. We're a system integrator consulting company. We have around 15,000 employees worldwide. Last year reached 2 billion revenue and have a basically very diverse consulting offering, you know, from management consulting, but also going down to the lowest bits and pieces. We even have some colleagues that do embedded hardware development and all of this stuff, but typical system integrator with custom implementations, right? Mm-hmm. And what I do, I work for our CTO, Filippo Risante, and I managed I manage 5 communities of practices, as we call them. Mm-hmm. And these are, you might call them R&D innovation teams that work on specific innovative topic with passionate people that we pull from all different units basically together. And I look after 5 of them, which is quantum and future of computing, spatial computing, so all things 3D, XR, VR, AR, mixed reality, whatever you want to call it. That's why I called this, like, way before Apple used spatial computing. I called this spatial computing maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something when I started that team. So I have these 2, then also general AI, which is, of course, a lot of generative AI topics these days. Then also digital human, which is a pretty cool aspect where we basically work on embodied AI. So think about giving AI a face, and we can do this with robotics, but also digitally with digital humans, basically. Mm-hmm. And I can share a bunch of examples later. There's some pretty cool stuff that we developed, also going into the emotional kind of conversation. And the 5th team is synthetic data, which I started last year, that is working on basically providing synthesized data sets for machine learning, for AI training, which is also a pretty hot topic. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we can dive into all of these if you like. And so that these are definitely also my kind of thing. And yeah, I love what I do. I work with all these various teams on new research and, providing also go-to-market. But mainly we're doing a lot of like reference implementations, kind of POCs and, exploring the landscape practically. And so that's what I do. But I also do a lot of talks, being out in the world, doing keynotes and other things, sharing knowledge. And then also working on some special projects here and there. I also manage a little R&D unit from, if you watch the video, Area 42, we have a dedicated lab in Turin in Italy where we do a lot of also robotics research. So I'm also quite involved in that. So, jack of all trades, but basically working mainly on innovation and pushing the boundaries in these topics.
So get ready for 6 episodes.
I mean, that's a lot, right? And I can also imagine that some of those kind of maybe overlap or at least are inspired upon each other. Or can inspire each other. That might also be the case. Where do you see, if you look at what you're currently working for, what do you see asks the most of your time right now? So what is the hottest topic that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, they're all pretty hard, but obviously generative AI is quite the thing at the moment. But in particular with the digital humans, that's surely something which we're working on. And I can talk a little bit about this, what this is all about, and share you also a bunch of examples. But maybe another thing is worth mentioning. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for mixed reality, as well as a Microsoft MVP for Azure AI services. So kind of a double MVP. If you're not familiar with that, these are awards that Microsoft provides to independent experts that share their knowledge. So, like you said, I'm quite active online, but also in presence at conferences and giving talks there. And a lot of that, of course, is about Microsoft technology in these areas that I just mentioned. I'm not married with Microsoft or anything, right? But it's basically a good relationship there, and yeah, I'm happy to get these recognition. And there's another thing I have is also Microsoft Regional Director. That's another smaller group which is not purely technical focus like the MVPs, but there's also some strategic, some business, and having a look on the broader field of things. So that's also what I do. So really, it's amazing to be part of these communities. I know you also are aware of those and are very much enjoying that. But yeah, we can talk about digital humans if you like or whatever. But I just wanted to mention this for the full picture, right?
No, but it's very good. It's very good. Yeah, I do know that. But whenever I hear a Microsoft Regional Director, I always directly, my mind goes to Rick Hepworth, who always says, I don't work for Microsoft, I don't have a specific region, and I'm not a director.
I'm not a director of anyone. Yeah.
But still.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the weirdest name ever for a community role, yeah.
Yeah, but it grew out of something.
Probably.
It was worth something different back then, but still the role in the feedback loop, and like MVP, right? The feedback loop, but with a smaller group, more, I think, long-term vision discussions there.
Yes, exactly.
So you mentioned digital persons a couple of times now, and I do know that some services are already implementing, I think, something like digital avatars that are at least resemble something human-like. I'm not going to say that it's generated to an extent where it actually looks like you're looking at a recording of a human, but it is something that looks like it. Is it something like that, or does it go a lot further?
So you might basically approach it in two different ways when you want to create a digital human. But what is a digital human in itself? So basically, you have a knowledge base, which is usually provided by an LLM, like a large language model, which also usually uses RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to get your custom knowledge base into this, right? So you have a certain kind of AI-enabled knowledge base, and then you give it a persona, you give it a face, if you will. So it's not just a chatbot, but you give it a face. And that face will basically, or it can be a whole body, right? That will then engage with you in a conversation. And again, the knowledge base is an AI. So you have a combination of real-time 3D. If you're building, like, for example, digital human with Unreal meta-humans, right? That's basically a technology you can use to basically animate a 3D model based from an audio file. And that's probably what you're alluding to, is you can also create these avatars, these digital humans with AI-generated avatars. Some folks might call it deepfake, but we don't like that term, obviously. You can also say AI-generated avatars. And that's also an offering that Microsoft has with, text-to-avatar, talking avatars, where you basically give a video of a person. Can be a short video, right? There's also other competitors on the market like HeyGen and a few others. You give, for HeyGen, for example, you give just a 2-minute video recording of a person, and then out of this, it will create a digital avatar you can even use for streaming. So you can have a real-time conversation. And the amazing part is it will also have the voice of that person. So if the digital human then answers you, it will actually also be in the voice of for example, of my voice, right? It will have the same kind of tonality, also some accent and so on is also moved forward. And it's pretty impressive how far that got with AI-generated avatars. But what we mainly did for clients, and we're working in that space since like 3 years probably, when not a lot of folks were working on that. We have been using mainly meta-humans from Unreal. So this is basically 3D rendered digital avatars, and they are created manually, right? So handcrafted with 3D modeling, or for others, we actually also did some 3D scanning of a real person, and then you have that, as a head or as a face, and then can have a conversation with it. And I can also tell you a little bit about some example use cases, because it might still be a little bit abstract, and you might wonder, why would I use this? What would it be useful for?
Well, that is my question, right? Like I can imagine, like your example with you have some knowledge base, you put some AI on there, and you see in a lot of places that's now a chatbot. Like you ask you a question, you get a pretty sharp answer and some pointers in the right direction.
Yep.
What does the actual putting the human-like way of communication, a face, maybe some non-verbals, like what does it add? Do you also read back? Like do you turn on the camera for the other side?
Oh, I love your thinking, because you're getting to the next stage. Is the what we're also working on right now is what it's called affective computing. So not effective with an E, but affective with an A, which basically means to understand the emotional state of your counterpart, of the human that is basically in front of the system. And for this, you can use various signals. Like you said, you could use the camera
Yeah.
to analyze the facial mimics, right?
Yeah, I can only imagine that that's the extra layer that you're gaining for, right? Because otherwise it's a gimmick, and that's
Exactly.
it's fun to do, but
you really want to get into the emotional conversation and don't have this kind of a stiff conversation, right? And so, like a camera, right?
Yeah.
You can analyze the facial expressions, and if you're smiling or looking angry, these kind of things. But working a lot with my Italian colleagues, you also want to get them to get this kind of the stuff. You want to see the body language, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're also working on, but it's obviously much harder to analyze. So these are just the visual signals, but you also get other signals like what the person is saying, obviously, right? I can talk very calm, but say a very bad thing.
Yep.
And so it's not just about how they are saying it. That's also an important aspect, right? The tonality, if it's like shouting or something, but also what they're saying, right? So we have these 3-4 signals basically. And what we have is this kind of personality model on emotional system, which then takes all of this as an input, as a multi-modal input, if you will, and then analyzes this and then comes up with a proper response in a sense of the textual response, what the user will hear. But also we classify the emotional state and then can use this, for example, concretely with Azure custom neural voice or with Azure speech services. We can also give the emotional state that we analyzed, and we react accordingly. So if a person is very angry and shouting or something in a support call, we can calm them down a little bit because we might answer in a more empathetic way, right? And so this then goes into the output model. And that's also part of effective computing. First of all, understanding the human emotions, and then synthesizing also a proper emotional response, which is the tonality of the voice. You can control this, right? You can control what is being said. And then also for the visual aspects, we're working also closely with NVIDIA there. There is solutions like audio to face, where you give it an emotional state or just an audio snippet, and it will provide you the proper facial animations, basically. If the person should be smiling or looking rather a little bit angry. In fact, we were just at SIGGRAPH, the world's most renowned computer graphics conference a few weeks ago. We were invited by NVIDIA and gave a talk there to show our digital human solution, because we're using NVIDIA ACE for speech recognition, and then also mainly audio to face for animating the facial expression. So a lot of complex pieces coming together to just have a more emotional conversation, right? To enable a more emotional conversation. And we're using that deployed right now on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean Sea. We're working with Costa Crociere. It's or Carnival Cruises. Other folks might know it. That's the mother company. And what we have there is, for example, a kiosk on the ship, and you can go there, tap your card, like your room key, and so it will recognize who you are and then provide personalized information. Or you can also learn about a city that they might stop with the cruise ship. Let's say you're going on a cruise and they might stop in Barcelona, so you can ask about Barcelona, what you should do, and then you can also buy the excursion. And the benefit there is also the scalability, like, because on these cruise ships, the ticket counter is always overrun. They don't have enough stuffing there. And so basically, this is a great way to have a more engaging conversations, because especially elderly people, they don't like to just book it online on their phone, right? They like to talk with someone. And if you have it in a nice, touch point where you have a nice screen and it looks good and sounds good and it feels more emotional, we have some analytics running there. We see 10 times increase in conversations and 10 times increase in interaction. So that is working. You see also a sales uptick there. And that's just one example. I can show you a few more or tell you about a few more examples. One I really want to mention is on the educational side of things. We're working together with the Luigi Einaudi Foundation. Luigi Einaudi was the second president of Italy and also a great economics expert. And we recreated him. Obviously, he's not alive anymore, right? Second president of Italy. You can imagine he's gone since a long time. But we recreated him as a persona. It looks like Luigi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can also talk with him because he was an economics expert. So we put all the papers, all the books he wrote into the knowledge base. And now you can have a really nice conversation with him. And simply going to the website, actually, of the Luigi Einaudi Foundation, you can do this there. But just imagine as a school person, as a student, going to school, how amazing would it be if I can put on a VR headset and have a conversation with Albert Einstein in his garden virtually and ask him about the relativity theory or whatever. And it's much more immersive learning. There's so much potential in education for these scenarios.
It's so awesome to see what the different types of use cases can be if you think beyond the first thing of, hey, I want people to be able to ask a question on my website and then it should give an answer based on whatever we have in our ticketing system.
But from
this
the
is like
business side,
3 or 4 steps ahead, right?
Yeah, we're always thinking about we need a solution for that, and it ends there because it ends at the MVP, and then we go to something else. And this is just completely from the other side. It's like what is possible, and how can we match that, and what will it bring? Because you need to think about what does this dimension bring. And if you think about it, like if you got an email and it's worded slightly wrong, or your mood was wrong while you were reading it, it can mean so many different things.
Yep.
Just acknowledging that these channels are really unused at the moment in communicating through IT. Indeed, for learning, for like I can imagine an online medical thing where you want to ask questions to a knowledge base and you feel uncomfortable because you feel bad or whatever. That's where these things become super powerful. And not just an answer like I just Googled what I feel and I might die tomorrow.
Isn't there a term for this? Like when people Google diseases and then they get so anxious because there's always only the worst outcome that you find online.
Yeah,
and there's even a term for it. I think
I saw a meme coming by this week about it, but that's why maybe I thought about it. But I think those things, and especially that's why I also asked the question for reading the camera back. Most chatbots don't get my sarcasm.
I think most humans don't get your sarcasm.
Okay.
No, but what I can also imagine.
Isn't it sometimes also funny, right? I'm also kind of sarcastic, a person that talks a lot with irony and so on. And some folks, right, they just simply don't think like that. And then they look at you, it's like you're making a little joke and they look at you. It's surprising, right? How little humor some folks have.
They take themselves too seriously, probably.
Yeah, no problem here.
No, but one of the things I think, Rene, you just mentioned elderly people on the cruise. But think about banks, right? I mean, here in the Netherlands, most banks have closed office, and I think 98% of everything goes online now. But if for an elderly people, it feels like you made an appointment with somebody, and you go into something like a kiosk or maybe on your own laptop, and it looks like a Teams call, but on the other end, it's somebody generated like this. It can give people the feeling that they're actually being understood and that they can tell their story and then get their stuff done. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing in the digital age these days.
Yeah, but you see the difference, right? Asking a question or filling out a form. If you get incentive to continue talking or whatever, you can do that kind of interaction. It's completely different for someone who is not exactly aware how to do a certain thing, like at a bank or whatever. It's different than filling in checkboxes.
Oh yeah, and especially if you can navigate the feelings of the person on the other end,
and then react. Yeah,
and then react based on that. I mean, that doesn't matter.
We could use humans for this.
That's not scalable. We might get a resource problem somewhere there.
And that's the point, right? Like the scalability of it. It's not about replacing humans. It's really just about scalability because we have a lot of skills shortage in many areas, right? And also, like you're saying, for example, with banking, right? It's simply economics. And so we still have to, of course, fulfill the human conversational need. And so it's important to have more emotional response because we are humans and we don't talk like robots. And it's still a long way to go. I mean, we're getting close. I can show you some examples later, but the point is still a long way to go, right? Because we can understand the emotional state in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. Like a little bit at least. Mm-hmm. You know, if I'm looking angry or if I'm, you know, talking in a certain way. But sometimes it's much more subtle than we might think it is. The mood, the whole topic of mood, right? That's not even thought about. I mean, there is, of course, research also with neuroscientists, but just understanding the mood of a person is a whole different thing, right? If something, you know, this morning, for example, I don't know, I had a bad start, whatever happened, whatever is the case, right in this moment, like in the afternoon, I might feel fine, but I'm still in a bad mood today because something, you know, weird happened this morning. And that's obviously a whole different story, how we can understand this. And obviously we also got to do it in a responsible manner, right? Because in the end, what you would have to do if you want to understand all of this, you would basically have to track all the stuff the person does. And then that's obviously we're getting into a lot of privacy potential problems. So we got to make sure this runs also in a privacy preserving way that is also, you know, fulfilling AI Act, for example, right? Which is, for example, saying, okay, you cannot just analyze the emotional state of a person without their consent. So you got to have their consent first, and you got to use it in a proper way. But if you put this up front and make it obvious to the user, like that you're doing this, then it's safe and fine, right? You just have to make sure you're not just running cameras all over the place, analyzing the emotional state of people. Like that's a terrible dystopian thing. So let's rather make sure we use it in a proper way. And that's also the reason why
get a pop-up to allow your telemetry for your being,
and put some sensors on your arms and your head for body temperature and
like you threw your phone pressure 3 times today. We know enough.
Yeah. That's also, let me just add one thing, and that's also the reason, like for Luigi Einaudi, there is audio recordings of his voice, right? But we did not recreate his voice because he did not give his consent while he was still alive, which is the common theme you see with pretty much all hyperscalers. I know very well from the Microsoft field. Like if you want to train a custom neural voice, so basically you give a bunch of speech samples or an audio file, and then you get an AI model for text to speech that really then sounds like that person. Just, you know, for everyone, I know you guys know that very well, but just for everyone that is listening, that's what custom neural voice is all about. And that part, of course, needs the consent of the person. And since Luigi is already dead, we could not get his consent, although the foundation and the kind of, you know, where they're keeping all his legacy, they said they wanted to do it. We can still not do it because he did not personally give his consent. So we're using a generic voice for him, but it's the right thing to do, right?
It is. Yeah, it is. That just one thing. I was really curious while you were talking about trying to understand the emotions of people and why they are looking a certain way and that kind of stuff. Did it ruin person-to-person communication for you? Or did it at least have an impact where you're actually analyzing while you're speaking to someone? You think, wait a minute, did he just glance up? He's thinking about something else.
Kind of, yeah. You get a little bit more. You get a little bit more sensitive to it and watch it a little bit differently. That's for sure, yeah. But you know what is more annoying is like, I mean, we're all humans. That works, right? You know, but what is more annoying with the whole Gen AI stuff is I get a lot of emails, obviously, like all of us. And some of those emails are very well written now, and you definitely know that that person used some Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever.
Especially if you know the person doesn't speak like that.
Yeah, it's like usually, you know, you get a perfectly English email, but the person is actually a German or whatever, right? Non-native English speaker, and you know immediately, okay, they used some tools like it, and there's so much, you know, so much bubble around it, so much unneeded, blah, 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 blah. So actually you need a Copilot or a ChatGPT to then summarize it for you again. But yeah, that is getting a little bit annoying.
Yeah, so then you're actually getting the original message.
You get the raw 3 bullets.
Yeah.
That's
write an email around this.
Hey, you speak to me in 3 bullets. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I always keep on saying. It's like, you don't have to spend time like drafting the best sentence or running through ChatGPT. Just send me the bullet points, whatever, right?
Yeah. Tell me what you want to tell me, and then we'll work from there.
It's so weird. Like I'm thinking about that now, right? Like let's say you are creating that virtual human, and you are baking in empathy and to react in that thing. do you think about getting that? Because at some point it's gonna be too good, right? It's like the ChatGPT response. It's gonna be perfect. It's gonna be perfectly balanced to your input, and it's exactly what you needed to hear. But then you go into the almost uncanny valley. It's like,
Mhm.
this is so good. This is not a human, and then you basically start to distrust it again. Like, is that a topic? I can imagine you have the robots, right? At some point, it's like, okay, this is good, but it's not real somehow. Or
Yeah.
with movies or video games, you had it at some point. It just feels wrong. There's something inside us that detects, okay, this is exactly what I needed to hear. And actually, some humans actually react like that, and you hate them because they're always perfect in their reaction. You want their personality. Are you adding a bit of
Like
flavor?
arms and that kind of stuff. Or
Well, yeah, and even like, I don't know, give one of those bots a bad day.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. It's kind of a little bit of randomness, and you gotta add these ums and
Yeah.
ahs and filling words. All of that is needed in the end. And a good example was also with OpenAI GPT 4.0 announcement they had a couple of months ago, by the way, which is always a little bit annoying these days, especially with OpenAI, to be honest. They announced all that stuff and then nothing really shows up at the door of a normal user,
Yeah.
which OpenAI Sora, right, is another example, a text-to-video model, all of these other things. And, in the meantime, the industry is moving forward. We see other models popping up, Luma, Dream Machine, whatever, or a few other available right now where you can actually use text to video. But coming back to the GPT 4.0 announcement, and I saw it actually, one of the developers that was present at the announcement was also at SIGGRAPH, so I saw him also demoing it there. And it's really, really impressive because what they have is a truly multi-modal model, because right now, if you're using GPT or another model, usually there are multiple models in play. If you want to create, for example, an image, right, it will internally call DALL-E to actually generate the image, but it's not the GPT model itself. Similar is, for example, when you give it an image and you tell it, okay, tell me what is on the image and so on, the computer vision task, it will also pull in another model. But what they're done actually with the proper GPT 4.0, which normal users don't have full access right now, but hopefully that is coming soon, is a truly multi-modal model that is trained, which is called joint embeddings. So basically, they train one model with all these different data types. And that is important, right? And that's why we need to get to, instead of using multiple models for analyzing the facial expressions, all of this, have one model, and it's trained on all these embeddings. And so it can make these connections between the different data types, between for example, the phonetics compared to the facial expressions and so on, right? It's making these things internally because they're dealing with these joint embeddings. And the GPT 4.0 announcement was quite impressive. Also, the demos they showed where actually the model was doing these kind of filling words and did all of these stuff. And that's where we're getting to. Might also be the reason they're not releasing it because it's too good already. But I rather think it's a scalability thing because obviously that requires quite a bit of processing power. But long story short, this is where we're aiming for. And this is definitely where the industry is moving. Multi-model LLMs, multi-model Gen AI models that understand multiple different input types and also can generate different output types, right? Video, audio, all of this goes in text, and then you get one common response. And that's why we're going in the industry. That's a big trend together with agentic workflows, right? Using multiple models together to work on a broader task. There's a lot of stuff happening. Plus robots.
And robots.
plus robots, and then you open up another can of interesting topics to talk about. But first, do you know what time it is?
Is it time for a totally random question?
It is now time for a totally random question.
I hope it's about lasers.
or robots. No, it isn't. Rene, if you could hack into any system or device, what would it be and what would you do?
Hack in any system or device. Well, speaking about GPT 4.0, I would definitely hack into that system and just to actually use it finally.
But there's availability in Azure, right?
Yeah, but not.
And Azure OpenAI has some.
You have the GPT 4.0 model available in Azure AI services. You also have it from OpenAI, but we don't have access to the true multi-modal version they have shown at the demo a few months ago. That's the challenge, right? They only enabled it for a few selected people or something like this.
Yeah, and I think it was, you just said some of the things weren't released yet because they might be too perfect. I think some time ago there was a product that was developed where there was a demo and then somebody said,
That's Microsoft, right?
Yeah,
That
kill it
voice replication. Well, I don't know what it was called. Like a few months ago, indeed. They said kill it off. It's
Yeah.
too good. Like,
this is too perfect. We shouldn't have this. This is not in the realm of responsible AI. But that's presumably a topic that you're also working around, because there's a lot of eyes on AI, and there's a lot of people thinking, "Hey, are we going to be responsible in the way we're using AI?" So, what's your take on the responsible AI movement, and how do you try to incorporate that in your day to day?
Yeah, I can also imagine because you're in a research, you should also keep an open mind and like let's first see what's possible. So yeah, interesting what your position is there, indeed.
Yeah. It's a very good question, and I think, speaking about the trends, like I said, if I just gave a keynote this week, so also covering the trends. I mentioned embodied AI, I mentioned multi-modal. These things definitely big trends, and the third trend I always mention is alignment. It's alignment in AI, and what that means is that we need to align these systems that are quite powerful already. These large language models, in particular, we need to align them with human values, that they're doing only things that are good for us humans, for us as humanity in a broader scope. The challenge, though, is these alignments basically mean you need to add constraints, you need to add so-called guardrails to these models, to, for example, not allow a person to ask some questions like how to build something bad, right? Obviously, no one wants to do this. But where do you draw the line for other things, right? And the challenge I see is definitely also on the cultural side in the society, because if you think about it, like most of that research is being done in the Silicon Valley and in the US, right? And they have a different cultural mindset than we might have here in Europe. Or think about you're in an area like, let's say, in Africa or whatever, right? There's a different cultural aspect to all of it, and what might be fine in the US to us might not be appropriate here, and also the other way around. So that's the biggest challenge, is the alignment. That's actually, with all the technical challenges we have ahead of us, I think the bigger one is actually the societal aspect. And so we got to make sure these are being used in a responsible manner. But what that means is very much fuzzy. It's not defined. And, some person might have a political view on certain things which they don't agree with. And so that might be actually implemented in the model and the training data, right? And that's a problem, because you want to have an unbiased model. And that's the biggest challenge, because what we're dealing right now is with black boxes, right? No one actually knows really well why these transformers, which are LLMs, work so well, right? It's kind of a black box. By the way, there is a neuroscientist that did a research where they looked at the human hippocampus, a central element of the human brain for long-term memorization. And they found out that the hippocampus shares certain characteristics with a transformer model, which is the model architecture behind a large language model. They don't say it's the same, but they say there are certain characteristics, and which also might explain why these models sometimes hallucinate, right? We as a human might also sometimes remember a thing, and I'm 100% certain this thing happened exactly like this, but then my wife comes and tell me, no, you're wrong. And of course, she's always right? So the thing is, we also do these kind of hallucinations sometimes, or might remember things wrong. And we also see this with the LLMs. Interesting topic for sure. We still don't know why they work so well. And they might also not be the path to human level intelligence in the end, because they are too non-deterministic in certain things, right? But the point I want to make is, we live in this constantly changing world. There's new models coming out all the time, and we got to make sure we use them in a responsible way. And that's, for us, is in particular here in Europe, interesting. We have certain regulation that I think is also needed. We need regulation in that space. But for example, if I look at the current EU AI Act, it might already be a little bit too much, because what they're doing there is they're basically enforcing constraints on providers that create foundational models. So
we went already over the param size, right? And the compute power that goes into a model. We already broke the rule there. So
Right.
I think it's not allowed what we're using now because of it.
Yeah, it's if you have a large foundational model and it's being abused by someone, like, you're responsible because you provide that foundational model, which is the wrong way to look at it, I think. Andrew Ng, by the way, if you know him, very famous AI researcher, he's also very much on that point I'm making here. Instead of kind of enforcing these things on the foundational model providers, rather enforce it on the application level. Right? If an application is abusing an LLM in a wrong way, then, well, kind of constrain that application developer and not the foundational model provider, right? Because, like, in the end, it's too broad, it's too much, and that will hinder innovation. And we already see it. For example, Meta does not release one of their current newer models in Europe at the moment because they're uncertain. Same thing with Google and ImageGen. They're also not releasing it in Europe at the moment, right? Might also be GDPR issues and not only AI Act. But the world is moving on, right? We got to make sure it's in a responsible way, but we also got to make sure we're not hitting the brakes too much.
Yeah, so we need people on both sides of that spectrum, one pushing towards the development and other people really, well, maybe from the regulation, and we'll need to find the balance in there. But it's hard, like you say, about the culture, right? You have in one part, or even in a smaller community, one thing is accepted and the other thing is not. But you also know when talking to another part of a community or whatever, certain things you don't say. So you restrain yourself. If you would have a human that does everything exactly right, or as the least common denominator of all the responses it could give, because it's taking into account all kinds of cultures, it's basically silent. So also useless. So it's so hard, and I really think we will get. Well, you're mentioning multi-modal, but like also to get actual results out of like complex systems, you need different models with different tasks, different responsibilities. One being creative, one being restrictive. One like a human culture gets to a result, right?
Yeah. And another interesting aspect, I think, with the whole Gen AI movement is when we're talking about the responsible aspect, is the immense progress on text to video. We touched on OpenAI Sora, which is not available because, for example, one of the reasons might also not just be scalability, because you need a lot of computing power, but the reasons probably also of making sure it's responsibly used. If you look at some of the recent stuff on X, for example, that was created with Flux. Flux is from a company, interestingly, it's called Black Forest Research. And so Black Forest Research released Flux and Flux Schnell, which is German for fast. Long story short, it's a very impressive text-to-image model. Give it a prompt, creates super realistic images, especially of people. It's very hard to spot the differences. And then you can take those and run them through Runway Gen 3 or whatever the latest version is for that video model. And just look it up, Flux or something on X. It's incredible. The videos you see there, it's especially those with human. If you have an untrained eye, it's very hard to spot. But for those folks that want to spot it, here's a couple of tips. Always look at high frequency stuff. What that means is teeth, right, where you have a lot of repeating patterns, basically. Fingers are solved now. They always have proper fingers, 5 fingers, not 6 or 4 anymore. Text, also very important. You usually see it also in the text. And then you also sometimes see it when there's a high contrast area. For example, like if there's an image generated where the person is wearing like a badge or a necklace or something like this, watch when they move, right, how it behaves there, these kind of things. Or the hair, also high frequency with all the hairs. You see it sometimes there, but it's getting very, very close, and it won't just be enough to have watermarks on these videos, right?
No, it's actually funny you talked about the fingers, because
that was the beginning, right?
No, I saw. No, the beginning was Will Smith trying to eat spaghetti.
Oh yeah, that was.
I know that. It was also.
But with the fingers, I saw somebody who went to, I think, Copenhagen Developer Festival.
Did you see the one with the 6 fingers?
He really had. He said, always bring a spare finger. So he had, I think it was 3D printed, a 6th finger on his hand that he just.
So you could deny that.
He said
him.
You can always say it's generated when you have your 6th finger with you.
I saw the picture this week.
I mean, it's so fun that these types of things are now being thought of, because all of the possibilities that we have, right?
Yeah. And another thing is also we here are thinking about to use it responsibly, which is very important. And I'm glad there are certain regulations, especially when it comes to the kind of monitoring of people's behavior, right? If we look in certain countries in the world, they simply don't care. They just use this software to
Mm-hmm.
spy on their citizens like crazy, right? If you cross the street, like a camera will track you, and then you walk into the next alley, another camera will track you, and they keep track of you while you walk through the city, give you an ID, analyze your behavior, give you a social credit score, and these kind of things, right? That's very much dystopian, and I'm glad we have some regulation that it's not going at least into this direction, because this is definitely what we need to prevent. And but sometimes also the cat is already out of the bag, right? So we got to
Oh
make
yeah.
sure we are still using it in a responsible manner, although it's possible to do a lot of things. You don't have to do all of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also thinking about military applications, right? There's so many bad things you can do with it. And so let's make sure, like, that's what I always, kind of say and also apply, is like, let's make sure you cannot do bad things with it. And that's also a part of security and privacy, right? You got to make sure you cannot too easily hack into the systems. I mean, every system is hackable, right? But just make sure you apply very good security standards. And by already using Azure is a pretty good thing, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
build on top of a common enterprise, very secure infrastructure. That's also when sometimes it's interesting, especially in Germany, right? When you talk with certain folks, some folks are still on the kind of thing. Oh, I need to have all the data on my server room because it's there, and I know it's there and it's
Mm-hmm.
safe and kind of thing, which is always ridiculous. I mean, I don't tell you guys news. You live and breathe it every day, in and out, and I'm sure you also had these conversations. People simply don't realize that their unpatched server in their little server room is much more vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
than it's in Azure, right? They have, like, what is the team size? Maybe 4 or 5 figure, no, thousands of people just working only on security and
Mm-hmm.
on incidents and all of this, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
go to the cloud.
Definitely. Definitely. Like, how do you think about, because we're talking about security and making sure this acts well, and like it's we need to make sure, but the actual security, because I think we went into a shift when comparing to other technologies. All technologies I've ever seen are cool and indistinguishable by magic if done properly, right?
Yeah.
But these actual LLMs and like anything in that research, it's different. Like, because as you said, we almost don't understand what's going on ourselves. Like, it's a model we put a lot of input in, and at some point magically it starts responding in a way that we expect it. And but because there are no rules there, it's generating word by word in most cases, and what graphics is a bit different, but we cannot put normal security thinking and practices around it. The only thing is that we can control the output to redetermine what it's saying now, and if that makes sense, we need to filter it and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
we cannot steer once it's in there. Like, I think we need a lot of conversation and thinking, and people really understanding what's happening here to explain to also a business person. It's like, okay, we now start implementing these things. There's, after an incident, there's no researching it. And I think for self-driving cars and stuff like that, that already went into that direction years ago. Like, are we getting a completely new, like, security or quality skill in there?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, there is the OWASP organization,
Mm-hmm.
OWASP,
Yeah.
has the top 10 or top 20 or something LLM attacks or LLM issues, or whatever they call it. You
Yeah.
will find it online if you search for that. And they list all the possible things you can do, right? You can, it's crazy. I mean, think about, you can actually, when they're training the data, you can inject stuff in the training data. No one will ever notice, but at a certain point, when some person asks a certain question,
Trigger it.
they will get
Yeah.
this wrong info, and then it will boom, right? You can inject in the inference. Also crazy stuff is actually what you can, if you, for example, expose an LLM on your website, let's say through a chatbot, There's also these kind of, back in the days, SQL injection attacks. You can also do prompt injection, right? You can inject certain things in a prompt, or if you give an image to a computer vision model like a GPT-4 Vision, whatever it is, you give an image, right, and tell it, okay, tell me, analyze the image. You can hide, almost invisible pixels where it's just like one brightness difference, right, which the human eye will not see, but the computer vision model will see it, and so you can hide some text in there with hidden instructions on your website, whatever. There's a lot of possible attacks, and yeah, it's a big research area, which we also have some cybersecurity experts that are looking deeply into this, how you can make sure these models run in a safe way. Again, one good thing is already, when we work with clients, a lot of them wanted to use ChatGPT, but it turns out there was a study last year that 11% of the input data on the public ChatGPT website is confidential. And that means people put in data they should not put in there, because there's a little disclaimer at the bottom. I'm sure most people read it, which says, like, we might use your data to improve our models, which basically means they're storing it. And so don't do this, right? Don't use the OpenAI chatgpt.com website and put in confidential data. But you still want to use the power of these models. And so what a lot of companies did, where we helped them, is basically creating in-house ChatGPTs, where we're in the end creating a front end with some custom functionality as well. And in the back end, it's using Azure OpenAI services, because you can basically use the same model, but they provide you a sandbox where it's also not crossing requests with other people, and it's really running in a safe sandbox. And Microsoft, and actually other hyperscalers, also followed that path. But Microsoft was the first one to say, we're also doing the Microsoft copyright commitment. So if someone is basically suing you because they might say, oh, you're using this LLM, and in this training data, that was like my copyright info used or whatever, Microsoft will go into that and will take care of it for you. And so that's a good aspect. But I think coming back to your original question, like on a security standpoint, it is important that we apply the typical security principles that are common, but also make sure that when we expose these LLMs to users, to also do it in a proper way and have also a fine-tuned model. Because with fine-tuning, you can actually already do a lot of things where you teach certain behavioral patterns to the model. And so that's also an important aspect. But yeah, applying typical normal security standards is obviously the first thing. And that's actually where it usually fails already.
That's true.
Yeah.
We still have SQL injection.
That.
Yes.
I feel like we could literally speak for like 6 episodes. So I am going to, or we are going to reach out to you to pull you in for another one, Rene. But for now, I think we need to try and round up. Is there anything that you would like to get back to that we discussed today, or anything important you want to add?
Yeah, and maybe just the last notion on the generative AI in general. I think there's also a lot of AI dooming around, where some folks, they watch too much Terminator or other sci-fi movies, right? And that's what I always saying. So I was just at a parents kind of thing for the school yesterday, and someone was just a normal person, right, was asking me, yeah, I'm a little bit scared about AI. They're all normal people are a little bit scared because and then I asked them, like, it's because of Terminator. Yeah, I'm thinking about Terminator. It's like crazy, right? How this movie ruined the whole perception of so many people. Like, whoa, that the robots are going to kill us. Anyhow, my final statement is, don't be afraid of the future when it comes to Gen AI, but embrace it. Use these tools, use these services, experiment with those if you have not done it yet. And that doesn't also not mean that you're getting unemployed. A job is a sum of multiple tasks. And for certain tasks, we will get AI assistant. That's for sure. And this is also not going to go away. And people that are actually using and exploring these tools will be in a good state. Those people that don't and just say, I don't care, it will just go away, well, think twice about it. And so embrace the future with curiosity, and make sure in your prompts to always write please.
Yes, just in
That's
case.
a great thing to end with, Rene. Thank you so much for being here. It was awesome talking to you. And again, I would love to continue this sometime.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Beta Talks, the podcast. Beta Talks is made possible by BetaBit Managed Software Development. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.